The desert wind carried the acrid smell of gunpowder and fear across the makeshift forward operating base in eastern Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos pressed her eye against the spotting scope, watching the distant ridgeline where death had been raining down on American forces for 3 weeks straight. The enemy snipers had turned this valley into a killing field, and even the most elite Navy SEALs were struggling to counter the threat. Commander Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead as he studied the tactical map spread across the wooden table in the command tent. Red X marks dotted the terrain, each one representing a confirmed sniper position that had claimed American lives. His SEAL team had attempted 7 different missions to eliminate the threat, but the enemy shooters seemed to vanish like ghosts after each attack. "They know this terrain better than we know our own backyard," Morrison muttered to his team leader, Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez. "Every time we think we have them pinned down, they slip away through caves and hidden paths we didn't even know existed." Rodriguez nodded grimly, pointing to the latest intelligence reports. The enemy snipers were using advanced tactics, coordinating their attacks with precision that suggested professional military training. They would strike from multiple positions simultaneously, then disappear before air support could arrive. Local villagers spoke of the shooters in whispered tones, calling them the mountain ghosts who could kill from impossible distances. Santos had been assigned to the base as part of a specialized reconnaissance unit, but her reputation as one of the Army's most skilled marksmen had not gone unnoticed. She had grown up hunting in the mountains of Colorado, learning to read wind patterns and calculate bullet drop over extreme distances from her grandfather, a Vietnam War veteran. Her natural talent had been refined through years of military training, making her one of the few soldiers capable of engaging targets at distances exceeding 1,000 meters. The morning briefing painted a grim picture. Casualties were mounting, and the enemy snipers had effectively shut down a critical supply route through the valley. Convoy after convoy had been forced to turn back after taking sniper fire from the surrounding hills. The psychological impact on the troops was becoming as damaging as the physical casualties. "Intelligence suggests there are at least 4 shooters working in coordination," the briefing officer explained, pointing to satellite imagery on the projection screen. "They're using World War II-era rifles, but don't let that fool you. These weapons are accurate, reliable, and in the right hands, deadly at extreme range. The shooters appear to be former military, possibly Russian or Eastern European mercenaries hired by the Taliban." Santos studied the terrain maps, noting the elevation changes and potential shooting positions. Her military mind began calculating angles, distances, and wind patterns. The enemy had chosen their positions well, taking advantage of natural rock formations that provided excellent concealment while offering multiple escape routes through the mountain's cave system. Morrison approached Santos after the briefing, his expression serious. "Staff Sergeant, I know you're not officially part of our team, but we need your expertise. My boys are good, but this situation requires someone with your specific skill set. These snipers are picking off our people one by one, and standard counter-sniper tactics aren't working." Santos looked out toward the ridgeline, where heat waves distorted the distant mountains. She had heard the stories from wounded soldiers about the precision of the enemy fire, single shots that found their mark from distances that seemed impossible. The fear in their voices when they described the sound of bullets cracking overhead had told her everything she needed to know about the threat level. "What makes you think I can succeed where your team couldn't?" Santos asked. Not from arrogance, but from genuine tactical curiosity. She respected the SEALs and knew they weren't asking for help lightly. "Because you think differently," Morrison replied. "You're not trying to assault their positions or outflank them through terrain they know better than we do. You're a precision shooter. You can engage them at their own game, on their own terms." That evening, Santos spent hours studying the enemy's patterns. She reviewed after-action reports, casualty reports, and time-stamped photographs of bullet impacts. Slowly, a picture began to emerge. The snipers weren't random in their targeting. They were methodical, professional, and most importantly, they had developed habits. The enemy shooters favored early morning and late afternoon attacks when the light created the most challenging conditions for counter-snipers. They typically fired 3 to 5 shots before relocating, and they always targeted leadership first, then radio operators and medics. This suggested military training and an understanding of how to maximize psychological impact on enemy forces. Santos also noticed something the previous analysis had missed. The bullet impact patterns suggested the enemy was using at least 2 different rifles with slightly different ballistic characteristics. This meant multiple shooters were operating from the same general area, taking turns to maintain continuous pressure while giving each other time to relocate between firing positions. As she prepared her equipment, Santos reflected on the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. The SEALs had exhausted their conventional options, and now the lives of American soldiers depended on her ability to outshoot opponents who had been dominating this battlefield for weeks. Her custom-modified rifle had been zeroed for the altitude and atmospheric conditions, and she had hand-selected ammunition for maximum accuracy at extreme range. The next morning would mark the beginning of a deadly game of cat and mouse among the mountains, where the slightest miscalculation or moment of inattention could mean the difference between life and death. Santos checked her equipment one final time, knowing that tomorrow she would either break the enemy's stranglehold on the valley or become another casualty in their mounting toll. Morrison's team gathered around the tactical map as Santos outlined her preliminary assessment. The enemy snipers had been so successful because they understood something fundamental about mountain warfare that the Americans had overlooked. In this terrain, patience and positioning trumped superior numbers and advanced technology. The enemy was fighting on their terms, using their knowledge of the local environment to maximum advantage. "Tomorrow we change the rules of engagement," Santos said quietly, her finger tracing potential shooting positions on the map. "Instead of trying to hunt them down, we're going to make them come to us." Dawn broke over the Afghan mountains with deceptive beauty, painting the rocky peaks in shades of gold and crimson. Santos had been in position since 400 hours, her ghillie suit blending perfectly with the scrub vegetation on a ridgeline that overlooked the main valley approach. Her breathing was controlled, her heart rate steady, as she waited for the enemy to make their first move of the day. Through her scope, she could see the convoy staging area where a deliberate supply run had been organized as bait. Morrison's SEAL team was positioned around the vehicles, but unlike previous operations, this time they weren't trying to hide their presence. The plan was simple in concept, but dangerous in execution. Make the enemy snipers believe they had easy targets, then turn the tables when they revealed their positions. Santos had spent the previous afternoon studying wind patterns and calculating ballistic data for every possible shooting position within 2 kilometers. Her range cards were meticulously prepared with distance, windage, and elevation corrections noted for dozens of potential target areas. The enemy had been successful because they shot first and relocated quickly. Today, Santos planned to be faster. At 07:20 hours, the convoy began moving down the valley road. Santos watched through her scope as the vehicles maintained proper spacing and speed, exactly as they would during a real supply run. The SEAL team members in the vehicles were wearing full body armor and helmets, but they were taking a calculated risk that had become necessary to break the deadly stalemate. The first shot came at 07:43 hours, exactly when Santos expected it based on the enemy's previous patterns. The crack of a high-velocity rifle echoed across the valley, and she saw the muzzle flash from a position approximately 800 meters northwest of her location. The bullet struck the lead vehicle's armored windshield, spiderwebbing the ballistic glass, but failing to penetrate completely. Santos had been tracking that exact position for the past hour, waiting for the telltale signature of muzzle flash. Her rifle was already aimed and ready. She controlled her breathing, felt the natural pause between heartbeats, and squeezed the trigger with smooth, steady pressure. The .338 Lapua Magnum round left her barrel with a supersonic crack, crossing the distance to target in just over 1 second. Through her scope, she watched the enemy sniper's position through the follow-through of her shot. There was no return fire, no movement. The first ghost had been eliminated. But Santos knew the enemy worked in teams. Even as she was engaging the first target, she was already scanning for the second shooter, who would inevitably reveal himself within the next few minutes. The enemy's tactical doctrine called for overlapping fields of fire and mutual support between sniper positions. The second shot came from a different direction entirely, this time from the eastern ridgeline where morning shadows provided excellent concealment. This shooter was more cautious, firing from a position deeper in the rocks where muzzle flash would be harder to detect. The bullet struck near the convoy's radio operator, missing by inches but achieving the psychological effect the enemy was hoping for. Santos pivoted her rifle toward the new threat, but this position was more challenging. The range was nearly 200 meters, and the target was partially concealed behind natural rock formations. She would have only a brief window of opportunity if the enemy sniper exposed himself for a follow-up shot. Minutes passed in tense silence. Santos controlled her breathing and maintained perfect sight alignment, waiting for any hint of movement from the suspected position. Her training had taught her that patience was often the difference between success and failure in long-range engagements. The enemy sniper was probably doing exactly what she was doing, waiting for the other to make a mistake. At 0751 hours, Santos caught a glimpse of reflected light from the enemy position. The sniper was using a scope, and the morning sun had created just enough glare to give away his location. Santos made micro-adjustments to her scope settings, accounting for the increased range and crosswind that had picked up as the sun warmed the valley floor. The shot was technically challenging, requiring precise calculation of bullet drop and wind drift over the extended distance. Santos drew on years of training and natural instinct, feeling the rhythm of the wind patterns and timing her shot for a momentary lull. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder, and she immediately began tracking for impact through her scope's follow-through. The .338 round impacted exactly where Santos had aimed, and the enemy position fell silent. 2 down, but intelligence suggested there were at least 4 shooters operating in the area. Santos knew the remaining enemies would be reassessing their tactics, possibly relocating to positions she hadn't anticipated. The convoy continued its movement down the valley, but now the psychological balance had shifted. Instead of being hunted, the American forces had turned predator. Santos methodically began scanning new sectors, looking for the next threat that would inevitably materialize. 20 minutes later, the third shot came from an unexpected direction. This sniper had moved to a position on the southern slope, using the convoy's movement to mask his own relocation. The shot was aimed at the convoy's medical vehicle, designed to maximize psychological impact by targeting those responsible for treating wounded soldiers. This shooter was different from the first 2, more disciplined, more patient. He fired once and immediately began moving, understanding that the American counter-sniper was now a real threat to his survival. Santos caught only the briefest glimpse of movement among the rocks before the enemy disappeared into the mountain's natural concealment. Santos knew she was now engaged in a deadly game of tactical chess. The remaining enemy snipers understood they were facing a skilled opponent, and they would adapt their tactics accordingly. No longer could they rely on static positions and easy targets. This had become a battle between professionals, where the smallest mistake would be fatal. The afternoon brought new challenges as heat shimmer began affecting long-range visibility and wind patterns became increasingly erratic. Santos had relocated twice using predetermined positions that offered different angles of observation over the valley. Each move required careful planning to avoid exposing herself to enemy counterfire. At 14:30 hours, she finally got her chance at the third sniper. He had made the mistake of returning to a previously used position, apparently believing that Santos had not detected his earlier location. This time, Santos was ready. Her shot was clean and precise, eliminating the third threat before he could fire on the convoy below. But the fourth sniper remained hidden, somewhere in the maze of rocks and caves that honeycombed the mountainside. Santos knew this final enemy would be the most dangerous. He had watched 3 of his comrades fall to her rifle, and he would be operating with the caution and cunning of someone who understood exactly what he was facing. The final phase of this deadly encounter was about to begin, and only one of them would survive to see sunset. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the Afghan mountains as Santos settled into her third firing position of the day. The remaining enemy sniper had not revealed himself for over 2 hours, and she knew this final opponent was the most dangerous she had faced. He had studied her tactics by watching the elimination of his 3 companions, and he was now hunting her just as intently as she was hunting him. Santos wiped perspiration from her forehead, careful not to create any movement that might catch the enemy's attention through his scope. Her ghillie suit was becoming uncomfortably hot in the afternoon heat, but she remained motionless, scanning the mountainside for any sign of her opponent. This sniper had demonstrated patience and discipline that marked him as a true professional. Through her radio earpiece, she heard Morrison's voice providing updates on the convoy's status. The vehicles had reached their destination and were preparing for the return journey. But they would not move until Santos had eliminated the final threat. Too many American lives had been lost to these mountain ghosts, and Morrison was not willing to risk his team until the valley was truly secure. At 15:20 hours, Santos detected movement on a ridgeline approximately 900 meters to the northeast. It was subtle, barely more than a shadow shifting among the rocks, but her trained eye caught the unnatural motion. The enemy sniper was repositioning, probably trying to gain a better angle on either her location or the convoy staging area below. Santos began tracking toward the suspected position, moving her rifle with deliberate slowness to avoid creating scope glint that might reveal her own location. As she adjusted her scope's parallax setting for the new range, she caught a brief reflection from the enemy position. The fourth sniper was indeed there, and he was aiming directly at her previous firing position. The enemy sniper fired first, his bullet impacting the rocks where Santos had been positioned 20 minutes earlier. The shot confirmed his location, but also revealed his tactical mistake. He was shooting at where she had been, not where she was now. Santos had anticipated this possibility and relocated specifically to avoid such an engagement. From her current position, Santos had a clear line of sight to the enemy sniper's location. The range was challenging but well within her capabilities, and the wind conditions had stabilized as the afternoon heat created more predictable air currents. She made final adjustments to her scope settings, accounting for the 15-degree upward angle and the slight crosswind from the east. As Santos prepared for her shot, she reflected on the tactical lessons of the day. The enemy snipers had been successful because they understood the psychological warfare aspect of their mission. Each shot had been calculated to create maximum fear and disruption among American forces. But their success had also made them overconfident, and overconfidence in combat was often fatal. The enemy sniper was searching for her, sweeping his scope across the terrain where he believed she might be hiding. Santos could see the subtle movement of his rifle barrel as he scanned back and forth, unaware that he was already in her crosshairs. She controlled her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow as her body entered the familiar rhythm of precision shooting. At 15:34 hours, Santos fired her final shot of the engagement. The .338 Lapua Magnum round crossed the distance in 1.2 seconds, impacting exactly where she had aimed. The enemy position fell silent immediately, and there was no follow-up movement. The fourth and final sniper had been eliminated. Santos maintained her position for another 30 minutes, observing the target area for any signs of additional threats. When she was satisfied that no other enemies were present, she contacted Morrison through her radio. "Overwatch, this is Ghost. Valley is clear. All 4 targets eliminated. Convoy can proceed with return journey." Morrison's relief was evident in his voice as he acknowledged her report. "Outstanding work, Ghost. You've just saved a lot of American lives today." As Santos began the careful process of extracting from her position, she considered the broader implications of the day's events. The enemy's sniper network had been completely dismantled through precision counter-sniper operations rather than massive force deployment. Sometimes the solution to a complex problem was not more resources or different technology, but simply the right person with the right skills in the right position. The convoy's return journey proceeded without incident, marking the first time in 3 weeks that American vehicles had traversed the valley without taking sniper fire. Word of Santos's success spread quickly through the forward operating base, and morale improved dramatically as soldiers realized the threat that had terrorized them for weeks had been eliminated. In the days following the engagement, intelligence officers confirmed that the 4 eliminated snipers had indeed been foreign mercenaries, probably former Spetsnaz operators hired by Taliban leadership to create maximum disruption of American operations. Their elimination had broken a carefully planned campaign designed to make the valley impassable for coalition forces. Morrison recommended Santos for the Silver Star, citing her exceptional marksmanship skills and tactical acumen that had succeeded where conventional military operations had failed. Her actions had not only eliminated an immediate threat, but had also demonstrated the importance of specialized skills in modern warfare. Santos returned to her regular duties, but her reputation as one of the military's most skilled snipers was now established throughout the theater of operations. Other units began requesting her assistance when they encountered similar threats, understanding that some tactical problems required precision solutions rather than overwhelming force. The valley that had been a death trap for American forces became a secure supply corridor, allowing crucial materials and personnel to reach forward positions that had been cut off for weeks. Local villagers, no longer intimidated by the mountain ghosts, began providing intelligence about other enemy activities in the region. 3 months later, Santos was transferred to a specialized counter-sniper unit where her skills could be utilized across the broader theater of operations. Her success in the Afghan Valley had demonstrated that individual expertise, properly applied, could achieve strategic objectives that entire units had been unable to accomplish. The 4 eliminated snipers were found to have been responsible for 17 American casualties over the previous month, making Santos's precision engagement one of the most tactically significant individual actions of the deployment. Her methodical approach to the problem, combined with exceptional marksmanship skills, had turned a desperate situation into a decisive victory. Years later, Santos would reflect on that day in the Afghan mountains as a defining moment in her military career. It had demonstrated that in modern warfare, technology and numbers were not always the determining factors. Sometimes, success came down to fundamental military skills, tactical patience, and the ability to think clearly under life-or-death pressure. The SEALs who had struggled for weeks against the enemy snipers gained new respect for precision marksmanship as a specialized military capability. Morrison incorporated counter-sniper tactics into his team's training regimen, understanding that future operations might require similar specialized skills. Santos's success became a case study in military sniper schools, demonstrating how proper preparation, tactical patience, and superior marksmanship could overcome seemingly impossible odds. Her actions that day proved that sometimes the most effective military response was not the most obvious one, and that individual expertise could achieve what conventional tactics could not.